where true chaos meets justice. Let me ask you something. What would you do if your own father lunged at you for not paying for your sister's plastic surgery? Would you back down? Or would you finally stand up and draw the line? If you're into stories that make you yell at the screen and whisper, "Karma," then hit that subscribe button right now. Because this one? It's personal. It happened at the dinner table, where every family fight in our house seemed to begin and end. The mashed potatoes hadn't even cooled before my father slammed his fist so hard the wine glasses jumped. "So you're really going to say no?" he barked. My sister, perfectly contoured and blank-faced, folded her arms across her brand-new designer top and said nothing. My mother just stared at her plate like she didn't hear a word. I blinked. "It's not a medical procedure. It's a nose job, Dad. She doesn't need it, she wants it. And I'm not taking out another loan for that." That was the moment he lunged. His chair scraped back with a screech, and he leaned across the table like he might actually hit me. "You're the one with a steady job. You live alone. No kids. What are you even saving for?" I stood up, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Exhaustion. I had paid for her college dropout loans. I had covered the damage she did to her car, twice. I had even lent them money when Dad's business folded for the third time in 5 years. I never asked for thanks. But now I was being painted as the selfish one. "Saving for peace," I said. "Something you clearly don't value." My sister rolled her eyes, whispering just loud enough. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous." The room fell quiet. All eyes were on me like I had committed a crime. Not because I shouted. Not because I slammed anything. But because I said no. And that, in my family, was apparently the biggest betrayal of all. I took a breath. I wasn't the villain here, but I could see how easily they wanted me to be. That way, they didn't have to reflect on how many times they leaned on me like a crutch while kicking away every part of me that said, "Enough." They didn't just want my help. They expected my sacrifice. I didn't always say no. In fact, for most of my life, yes was practically my name. Yes to staying late. Yes to bailing them out. Yes to being the one who showed up when no one else did. But the night my dad lunged across the dinner table was the night something cracked open, and for once, I saw it all clearly. Growing up, it was always the same story. I was the responsible one. My sister, Camille, was the fragile one. That was the word my mom liked to use. Fragile. Delicate. Sensitive. It was an excuse wrapped in pastel-colored pity. Camille got her way because if she didn't, someone would pay. And usually, that someone was me. When I was 15, she crashed our mom's car while trying to sneak out to a party. Guess who picked up a part-time job at the grocery store to help pay the insurance deductible? Me. When she dropped out of community college after 2 semesters of blowing off her classes, guess who drained their college savings to cover the loans? Also me. They told me it was temporary. They told me I'd get it back. Once Camille gets back on her feet. Camille never stood up. Meanwhile, I worked. I hustled. I gave up a full ride at an out-of-state university to stay close and help at home. Dad's auto shop went belly up when I was 19, and I was suddenly footing half the household bills with a job I hated but couldn't afford to lose. I watched my friends move into dorms and internships while I moved boxes and stocked shelves. I told myself I was being a good son, a good brother. I told myself I was building something for later. But later never came. Camille worked briefly at a makeup counter, then quit because it was toxic. She started an influencer account with our mom's credit card, branding herself as a lifestyle goddess. She borrowed clothes, borrowed lighting gear, borrowed my time, my space, and my emotional bandwidth. Every time I questioned it, I was met with the same lines. "She's trying. She's sensitive. You wouldn't understand." But I did understand. I understood being used. I understood that I was convenient until I wasn't. That plastic surgery bill was the line. Not because it was too much money, I've covered worse, but because of what it represented. Entitlement. Audacity. The idea that I was a walking ATM with no feelings, no limits, no dreams of my own. They didn't even ask nicely. It was assumed. Expected. Demanded. After that dinner, I went home and sat in silence. No TV. No music. Just me and the thick ache of disappointment. Not just at them, but at myself. For all the years I'd confused self-sacrifice with love. Then came the messages. Camille posted on her Instagram about toxic family members, and how even siblings can be jealous of your glow-up. My mom sent me a voice note saying I'd humiliated them, and how I should just do this one last thing, for the sake of family. My dad didn't say anything. But 2 days later, I got a call from a loan officer asking to confirm my application for a $20,000 line of credit. I never submitted any application. That was when the air changed. My spine straightened. My hands stopped shaking. I asked for the details and they emailed me the application form, with my name typed in, my old signature poorly forged, and a contact number that matched my dad's. I stared at the screen, stunned not by the crime, but by the sheer casualness of it. They thought I'd roll over. Again. Instead, I started gathering receipts, screenshots, bank statements, every loan I'd paid, every time I'd wired money to Camille, every bill I'd covered when Dad's shop went under. I compiled everything into a folder labeled Debt and Silence. But the silence didn't last long. Camille showed up at my apartment unannounced. She didn't even knock. Just barged in with sunglasses and attitude and a little speech prepared about how hard it was being the pretty one, and how no one ever understood the pressure. I didn't speak. I just pointed to the door. She left yelling that I was a bitter failure who'd never be loved. A week later, Dad called. Not to apologize, but to accuse. He said I'd embarrassed the family, that I was cruel, that I'd forgotten where I came from. I told him I remembered exactly where I came from. That's why I was done pretending it was normal. My family wanted loyalty without accountability, support without boundaries. They wanted me to carry their weight until I collapsed, and when I finally stood up, they called it betrayal. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just standing. I was walking away, and I was taking everything they built on my back with me. I used to think loyalty meant staying silent, biting my tongue, writing the check, showing up even when I was already drowning. I used to think saying no made me the bad guy. But after that dinner, after my father lunged at me across the table, I realized something terrifying and freeing. I had been loyal to the wrong people my entire life. And now, I was done. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that feels like rage with a purpose. Not the messy kind, the surgical kind. I didn't scream. I didn't text back. I didn't post online like Camille, crying into filters about how cruel her family was. I went silent. Because silence is the sound of something calculating. I began gathering every receipt, every transaction, every cent I ever sent to them, bank statements, Venmo logs, emails confirming transfers. Years of bleeding money while they called it love. I compiled it all into a single PDF folder, color-coded and time-stamped. I titled it Debt I Didn't Owe. Then I requested a copy of the forged loan application. I had to pretend to be naive, just someone confirming a detail about a recent application. They emailed it over without blinking. And there it was. My name. My birthday. My forged signature. It was bad. Sloppy. Almost like they didn't think I'd bother checking. That was their mistake. They thought my silence meant obedience. But this time, my silence meant I was building something. I took the file to a lawyer, a sharp, unflinching woman named Claire who barely blinked when I explained the situation. This is forgery, she said. At minimum, identity fraud. I know. Do you want to press charges? I want leverage. She smiled like a chess player recognizing a trap before it snaps shut. We filed a fraud alert, notified the FTC, and submitted a sworn affidavit to block the loan before it processed. The bank dropped it immediately. But I didn't tell my family. Not yet. I wanted them to think they got away with it. Because I wasn't just blocking damage. I was preparing a mirror. A week later, I emailed my parents and Camille. No greeting. No signature. Just one line and a link. Since you've all decided I owe you, here's the balance sheet. And below it, the PDF. With every dime. Every date. Every time I said yes when I should have walked away. They didn't respond. But Camille deleted her post calling me toxic. My mom texted. That was unnecessary. My dad, of course, said nothing. So I took the next step. Years ago, When Dad's third business collapsed, he refinanced the house under a panic deal I had warned him about. He begged me to co-sign. I refused. But I read every line of that contract out of guilt. I remembered the clause: the debt could be sold. Transferred. I called a contact from work. Someone who dealt with distressed real estate. And I asked a simple question. If I found the loan, could I buy it? He laughed. If the lender's looking to offload? Sure. Most people don't want to touch bad family debt. I'm not most people. 2 weeks later, after a quiet wire transfer and a mountain of paperwork, I became the lien holder on my parents' home. My home, technically. They didn't know. Not yet. But they would. I waited until the payment date passed, because I knew it would. Then I sent them the notice. Official. Sealed. From my lawyer. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. 3 hours after it arrived, my dad was at my door. Not yelling. Not violent. Just empty. You bought the loan? He asked, voice hoarse. I didn't let him in. I stood in the doorway. Calm. You tried to steal my identity to fund your daughter's Instagram face. I replied. This is the least I could do. He stared at me like I was a stranger. You would evict your own family? I looked him in the eye. You tried to bankrupt your own son. He didn't say another word. Just walked back to his car with that slow, stunned shuffle of someone who finally realized the golden goose stopped laying. Camille called next. Screaming. Crying. Telling me I was ruining everything. That I was bitter. That I was ugly, jealous, and always had been. I let her finish. Then I said, You want sympathy? Start with restitution. Until then, consider this your eviction notice. Click. What followed was a week of chaos. Mutual relatives messaged me, some begging, some scolding. They're your parents. She's your sister. Can't you just forgive and move on? But forgiveness doesn't mean free rent. And family doesn't mean immunity from consequences. 30 days passed. No payments. No counteroffers. So we filed the eviction. The sheriff delivered the papers personally. My mother cried. Camille threw something. My dad didn't even open the door. I wasn't there to watch it. I didn't need to. Instead, I sat at my desk and stared at the ownership documents, now cleanly stamped in my name. And for the first time in years, I felt nothing. Not joy. Not revenge. Just stillness. Like I had finally stopped screaming into a void and started building walls to protect the echo of my own voice. Later that month, I got an email from Claire. All clear. Foreclosure completed. Property title in your name. Full control. I stared at the screen for a long time. And then I donated the house. Not to them. To a local program for single mothers escaping financial abuse. I signed it over anonymously, but made sure one clause remained: none of the prior residents could reoccupy it. Because sometimes, justice isn't about reclaiming what they took. It's about refusing to let them take another second more. I moved out of my apartment and bought a small home on the other side of the city. Quiet street. Good neighbors. No ghosts. Melissa came with me. We were just friends then, but close. She helped me paint the walls, plant lavender out front. One day, I told her everything. She didn't flinch. You're not cold, she said. You're healing. And I believed her. I never posted about what happened. I didn't rant or gloat. I didn't expose Camille or my parents online. But stories have a way of leaking. Neighbors talk. Old friends whisper. Soon, people who once called me selfish were saying things like, I had no idea. You never really do, until someone stops enabling the illusion. A month later, I received one final message. From my dad. I hope you're proud. It said. You destroyed your own family. I didn't respond. Because he was wrong. I didn't destroy anything. They handed me the matches. I just stopped trying to put out the fire. When we got back, I planted a tree. It wasn't planned. We were walking past a nursery on the way home from breakfast, and I saw this little maple, roots tangled, branches thin but reaching. It reminded me of something half-broken but stubborn enough to grow anyway. I bought it. Dug a hole in the backyard. Planted it with my own hands. It felt symbolic, but not dramatic. Just quiet hope. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. I still had bad days. I still checked over my shoulder sometimes, expecting guilt to come knocking. I still woke up from dreams where my dad's voice echoed in my skull, saying things like, "You think you're better than us now?" Or, "Blood is blood." But the difference was, I didn't answer back anymore. I let those ghosts speak. I let them fade. I started writing. Not a memoir, not yet, but reflections. Pages and pages of thoughts I'd buried under years of silence. I wrote about sacrifice. About guilt. About how family can be both shelter and storm. I didn't know what I'd do with it, but it helped. The words gave shape to a story I'd spent most of my life trying not to admit was real. One day, I got a call from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. He said, "I heard about what happened, and I just wanted to say, I always knew you were carrying more than the rest of us." We met for coffee. He told me stories from college, ones I'd forgotten, like the time I missed finals because my parents locked me out after refusing to pay for Camille's dress and being called ungrateful. He remembered. Everyone remembered more than I realized. Turns out, when you finally step into your truth, other people feel safe enough to admit they saw it all along. 6 months after the foreclosure, I drove past the old house. It had been repainted. The yard was tidier than it had ever been. A minivan sat in the driveway, chalk drawings scattered across the sidewalk. Someone new lived there now. A family. Hopefully a better one. I parked across the street and just watched. Not out of spite. Out of closure. That house had seen my worst moments. My smallest versions of myself. It had heard me cry at night while pretending everything was fine. It had swallowed years of secrets and silence. And now, it wasn't mine anymore. It didn't hold power over me. That was the true end, not the paperwork, not the eviction. But that moment. Sitting there, watching the sun dip behind a place that no longer owned any part of me. A few weeks later, my dad messaged me. It was short. Abrupt. "Your mother's sick. She asks about you." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Guilt? Sadness? None of it came. Just stillness. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care. But because I finally understood I couldn't go back, not even for her. I told Melissa about it. She didn't judge. She just asked, "What do you need right now?" I didn't know. But the fact that someone asked was everything. Later that night, I lit a candle. Not for my mother. Not for my past. But for the version of me that died 1,000 small deaths trying to be enough for people who never saw him. I sat with that version. I told him he didn't fail. He survived. And now? He gets to live. In the months that followed, I started speaking publicly, small groups at first. Community organizations focused on financial abuse, toxic family systems, boundaries. I didn't name names. I didn't talk about revenge. I talked about healing. About what it costs to keep betraying yourself to protect people who've already decided you're expendable. People came up after every talk. Crying. Thanking me. Saying, "I thought I was the only one." You never are. You just think you are, until someone stands up and says it out loud. I kept the first copy of that speech in my desk drawer. I called it, "Blood is an Ode." It ends like this. "They taught me love was a loan I could never repay. So I defaulted. I walked away. And in doing so, I learned that real love doesn't keep score. It keeps you safe. That's the only thing I'd ever needed. And now? I have it. Not from them. But from me." They say blood is thicker than water. But no one ever finishes the quote. But the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. In other words, the people you choose, the bonds you forge, can be more sacred than those you're born into. It's a truth I learned the hard way. And it's one I carry now, not with bitterness, but with quiet, resolute peace. When your family betrays you, the world doesn't rush to your defense. In fact, it often turns its head. People are quick to excuse abuse when it comes dressed in the costume of tradition. They're your parents. It's your sister. You should be grateful. Gratitude, they say, is owed. But what if all you ever did was give? What if the gratitude never flowed in both directions? There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with waking up to your own mistreatment. It's not the absence of people, it's the absence of being seen. It's the realization that you were cast in a role long ago, and every time you tried to step off stage, the audience booed. You were the provider. The fixer. The strong one. And when you stopped performing, they called you selfish. But here's what no one tells you: choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's sacred. And sometimes, it's the only way you'll survive. I spent years confusing silence for peace. I thought if I didn't complain, didn't push back, didn't demand anything in return, then maybe one day they'd notice. Maybe one day they'd say thank you. But silence doesn't buy love. It only convinces people that you don't bleed. And once people believe you don't bleed, they stop caring when they cut you. Walking away wasn't about revenge. It was about stopping the hemorrhage. It was about deciding that my worth wasn't tied to how much I could sacrifice. That love built on guilt isn't love at all. It's leverage. Real love makes you feel lighter, not smaller. It makes you feel held, not harnessed. I've learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. And I get to decide who walks through. Saying no isn't a rejection of others, it's an affirmation of myself. It's a way of saying, I matter too. It's not easy. Especially when the people you love taught you that your needs are a burden. But healing begins when you honor the parts of you they ignored. It took time to forgive myself. Not for what I did, but for what I allowed. For all the moments I silenced my gut. For all the times I confused being needed with being loved. For every dollar, every apology I offered just to keep the peace. I had to grieve the version of me who thought loyalty meant setting myself on fire to keep others warm. That grief is real. But it's also the soil for something new. Because the beautiful thing about choosing yourself is that life starts choosing you back. In new friends. In honest love. In mornings that don't begin with dread. In conversations that aren't weapons. In homes that aren't war zones. You stop surviving, and you start living. Now, I don't tell my story for pity. I tell it for the person still stuck at that dinner table, being told they're ungrateful because they said no. For the son who always bails out his family and is told it's his job. For the daughter who pays her parents' bills but is called cold when she sets a boundary. For the sibling who is tired of being the responsible one while everyone else gets to fall apart. You are not alone. And more importantly, you are not wrong. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the people you love is walk away from the pattern that's killing you both. Sometimes your healing is the only mirror strong enough to reflect their dysfunction. And even if they never see it, even if they never say sorry, your healing is still valid. You don't need their permission to grow. And if no one has told you this yet, let me be the first: you're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to change the rules, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You're allowed to be the first in your family to break the cycle. Because the life waiting for you on the other side of that decision? It's not just free. It's yours.